All right, well, I'm glad you took the time to click on this link, this video today. You probably already know the context of what's been going on in student ministries. They've been spending 4 weeks talking about 4 specific subjects that are not easy or fun to talk about, but absolutely important, just raising the level of awareness. And so this one specifically is about depression. And so the point of this video is to spend some time not necessarily trying to define a specific type of depression because it looks different in each person, and maybe you're already familiar with this, but the important part about this is being able to recognize it in your student and then be able to do something about it. So as we go into this, I just want to define 3 major types of depression, and we'll end up focusing on one. One that's more of a biological, chemically based one that isn't as common is referred to as endogenous depression. And so you might notice looking down your family line behind you and maybe in front of you at your kids, some people are just more prone to feeling down, just feelings of darkness, unmotivated, hopelessness on a constant basis. And so those people tend to have to resort to seeing a counselor and a lot of times even medication. Another form of depression is reactive, which is the most common and the one we're going to focus on the most today, is when something happens in life. And the way in which somebody responds is very negative, and it really takes them out of their everyday rhythm of life. And they go through that period of darkness that we can refer to as depression, and they just can't seem to bring themselves out of it. And that'll typically last about 3 to 5 months. And then the third one that's important to know about is neurotic depression, which is a longer-term depression that becomes habitual, obsessive. It basically transforms that person into somebody that is totally unrecognizable to the person they were before that depression. And they really need to go through intense counseling through a psychiatrist who can prescribe medication to really pull themselves out of that. So in the context of students, it's important to know that it is very common for adolescents, all adolescents, to experience depression to a certain degree. It's important to know it is not the best thing to say, well, this is just a stage. I think that's very common, especially with teenagers, to say, well, they'll just get through this. It's just a stage. Now, for some, that is the case. But for others, we really need to pay attention to what's going on and asking questions there. You might find, if you're watching this video and you're in the midst of this, more females than males tend to speak of these feelings of being depressed, these feelings of hopelessness. At the teenage years, the reason for that is simply because females are more in touch with their feelings. They feel more deeply, and so it's harder for them to really process those, make sense of those, and get through them. And they're naturally affected by their peers on a whole other emotional level than guys as well. But as far as statistics, about 20 to 25% of boys report having depressed moods. And so this isn't some foreign thing. This isn't something that you need to freak out about if your child is in that. And then it could be up to 40% of girls report just having that depressed state of mood. And so when you notice as a parent your child going through these dark states where you can't really say anything, you can't really bring them up out of this yourself, it's important to differentiate what it is that they're going through, if it's a bad mood for that day or if you see it as a constant state. And so I'm going to just give you a few cues. First, verbal cues and then behavioral cues, so that you can kind of discern, hey, there's something going on here, and then most importantly, follow up in the best possible way. Some things that you might hear if your student is experiencing feelings of depression, they might say, nobody likes me. They might say, something bad is going to happen, kind of that impending sense of doom, believing that there's always darkness around the corner. I'm never going to be happy again. That kind of speaks to the sense of loss of the person that they were. They loved childhood, grew up, they feel like all has been lost. They'll never be able to gain that sense of happiness and contentment again. They might say, I'm such a loser. They might label themselves, identify themselves with the fact that they have no hope in life. And they look around and they say, I'm different. Nobody loves me. Nobody accepts me. I can't even be myself. And so there's a lot of pressure to have to be someone else that they don't feel like they're capable of even being anymore. The last one is, I just don't want to get out of bed anymore. Now, all of us have probably gone through this state in life where we're just unmotivated and maybe we're discouraged in life. But if you find that this is the case for 2 or 3 weeks, it's definitely something to pay attention to. Some behavioral cues, you might find that they're isolating or withdrawing from friends. Really pay attention to that. If just out of nowhere they start isolating themselves to their room, don't want to talk to anybody, not even their friends. Constantly tearing up or crying, maybe just getting more emotional than usual. Easily set off, bothered or angered. Maybe they're moping around or spending hours in front of the TV, if that's different than their normal behavior. Failing to complete schoolwork, all of a sudden they go from someone who's studious to somebody who just doesn't even care anymore. Having difficulty remembering things, that is something that is specific to feelings of depression, because you just lose all sense of focus and even the desire to be able to focus. And then the last one is they seem to become uncaring about their appearance, or there's an obvious neglect of hygiene, where it's obvious when they walk out the door in the morning that they just don't care how people perceive them, and just kind of this overall given up state. So those are things to pay attention to. As a parent, you're watching this video because you're already a responsible parent who wants to be able to pay attention to these things. And so when you look for those things, we want to act in a specific way and be the best possible parent in that moment. So just a couple of do's and don'ts. Starting with the do's, absolutely empathize with their feelings. Maybe you've gone through this dark time before and you're like, you just need to get with it. I made it through. You need to, we're inclined to give advice, but if we just sit and try to understand where they're coming from, they'll feel like we're actually with them. Another is challenge expressions of hopelessness. And that's not giving trite advice, that's simply speaking to the fact that there is hope at all, and you're reminding them of that. And then the last do is, and this can come off as a trite one, but it's really important, is encouraging physical activity to some degree. Just getting out and doing something. A lot of times we have to act our way into right thinking, if that makes sense, as opposed to trying to get our thoughts right so that we can then behave rightly. A lot of times if we just get ourselves up out of bed and get going, it can make a big difference. A few don'ts to pay attention to. Do not tell a depressed person to just snap out of it or cheer up. Don't expect that they'll be able to overcome this without help. That doesn't help them at all. And if somebody said that to you before, it's like, well, it's not that easy to just snap out of it. It's not just a bad mood. Another one is don't use shaming statements such as, well, you brought this on yourself. Or make them feel more shame than maybe they already do. Don't ignore or downplay suicidal thoughts or attempts. There's going to be another video clip that will show that deals specifically with suicide, but a lot of times it begins, almost all times it begins with depressed feelings. One unique question that I came across when I was looking at some updated material, I thought it was interesting that to gauge where someone is as far as their depressed level, they would ask a question about their level of gratitude. And so what researchers have found is they could discern someone's level of depression based on their response to the question, what is it that you are grateful for? So I would encourage you just in your own family times to go around the table and ask, what is it that you're grateful for? But the most important thing, especially as a parent, is to be able to model this. We are constantly talking about the things that you're grateful for in life. And so once students are able to pay attention to the things that are going around them, the things that they could consider to be blessings that they might have lost sight of, the more grateful they are, the more they get outside of themselves. The last thing I want to mention, and this could really apply to all the videos that we're doing, is I cannot stress enough the importance of the relationship between a father and a daughter. Now, this might be convicting to some, this might be discouraging to some, because you might be a single mom watching this and dad has just dropped the ball and he's out of the game. But if dad is there, or if you have the opportunity for your daughter to have a male role model, someone who can give her the affirmation and the value that she deserves, someone that can put on display the God-type characteristics that she needs to see, what ends up happening in a dysfunctional father-daughter relationship is she loses her sense of identity, and it's almost a sense of rejection, which is why so often you see girls grow up and they end up getting into dysfunctional relationships because they feel like they have to perform or gain approval through appearance or through acting certain ways. But if a father speaks into her life and tells her that she's beautiful, that she's valuable, that she has something to offer, and it's not based on performance at all, it seriously can make a world of difference and really bring her out of maybe that depressed state that she has found her in. So I encourage you to just take these tips and definitely watch these other videos as well. Thank you.